he's looking at his clipboard. You probably want to dismiss this one. And he said, why would I do that, Officer Stamper? I said, well, it's kind of a skinny pinch, language of the day. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, you know, he had an attitude. What do you mean by that? Well, he called me a pig. Okay. Now let me ask you a question about his sobriety. Was he drunk? And I said, well, he called me an asshole too. Was he drunk? No. He said, I'm going to dismiss this case. If you ever bring another one to me like this, I will make sure that the chief picks up your badge. And then he asked, does the Constitution of the United States mean anything to you, Officer Stamper? I was so angry I could spit. Behind all anger is what? Fear. I was enraged. What nerve this guy had. You know, he's standing there in his three-piece Hollywood suit and his hairstyle, and he's working out of an office, out of the elements, the heat, the cold. San Diego. This guy, if he's got a question, can turn to a colleague, can pull a book off a shelf and check it out. I'm out there in the real world. You know, with people spitting on my neck from the back of a caged car. What nerve does he have? Well, that lasted about 30 seconds. Rage. And I remember this like steps so clearly. As I walked away, I couldn't feel my feet. I couldn't feel myself. Couldn't really feel myself walking away from him, but I knew I was. And I get a few steps away, the rage had turned into embarrassment. The most extreme embarrassment imaginable. And by the time I slithered down the steps of the San Diego County Courthouse where municipal court was held, I was saturated in shame. And that was the moment at which I realized how far down the wrong path I had gone. From that point on, I write about that story and others in the book, but from that point on, I became a hydrophobic gas bag of a police reformer. You know, there's nothing like a reformed whore. And you know, I become a scold. You know, how can you do that? How can you say that? So on and so forth. And ultimately, along the line, I'd like to believe that I learned that my purpose really was to influence other people through leadership. It wasn't acting like a bad junior high school vice principal. I have the slightest idea what question led to that answer. But thank you.
Well, so what would you have done differently?
Yeah, I would. The reason I hesitated is I would not trade that experience for anything. I know at a cellular level what power can do to people. This is a joint obligation for the police unions and for the administration, is to help young officers learn a different kind of set of survival skills. How do you survive a career as a police officer if you're brittle and defensive and humorless and not developing confidence and psychological hardiness and so on and so forth. So having had that experience, I know in my heart of hearts what it feels like. I could feel the weight of my badge on my chest.